Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the senior minister.
Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the senior minister of Minneapolis.
And we are a historically humanist congregation, and this is Coffee and Wisdom. When we look at some of the streams coming into humanism today, Unitarian Universalism, looking at the past, considering the present, and considering what might be happening in the future. Today, I want to look a little bit, and this week we've been looking at Unitarian Universalism, where it comes from, what it means as a meaning structure. This little graphic is a bit snarky, I realize, but it does point up a very important truth. There are almost 5,000 gods worshipped by humanity, but don't worry, only yours is right. The good point is that one's religion is often culturally determined. And for those of us who have been lucky enough to be born into cultures where we can change religion, we may have done that. But for many people, that is not an option even today. So something to think about is the cultural determination of religion and what it means to have the power to change that cultural determination over time. And that's part of what's going on in Unitarian Universalism. And I really want to ask the question, what is the there? That's a Gertrude Stein quote. You may know that who said, in America, there is no there. Well, what is the there in Unitarian Universalism? Here is a schematic that simplifies where Unitarian Universalism comes from. Yes, we've got the chalice, flaming chalice over here, the end point of all of this, but let's take a peek for a moment at where it comes from. And you can see over here, yes, Hebrew Bible, often called the Old Testament by Christians, and Judaism. Of course, Judaism has now fragmented into several different forms. There were different forms in the beginning as well during the Bible days, but only about one of those really comes in specifically into Christianity. Christian Year One, a New Testament, or the Christian Scriptures as they're more properly called, and then what leads to Roman Catholicism and the schism group, Eastern Orthodox. Again, that schism goes way back in the Roman Empire period, but it is a split that occurs. And in terms of the actual family tree of Unitarian Universalism, it is true that off we went in Roman Catholicism and eventually into Protestantism during the 1500s with the Protestant Reformation. Now, again, this off goes the offshoots of this: Lutheranism, Calvinism, Baptists, Quakers, Methodists. You've got the Calvinism of the Presbyterians and the Dutch Reform movement. And then off you go into Puritanism, the Congregationalists, who then split into Unitarians, Universalists, and eventually reformed into Unitarian Universalists. Very simplified way of looking at all of this. And again, as I mentioned yesterday, really there are two central heresies going on that give us the name of this. That is Universalism, that everyone goes to heaven after death, and Unitarianism, that Jesus is a fine fellow, but only a human being, and God is indeed unitary, is one. So this is very simplified, but the picture is a concrete conduit with no rivulets coming in. And for those of you who have been following along in Coffee and Wisdom, there are lots of rivulets coming into this thinking through the many years, hundreds of years. So this is there to point out the simple framework, the skeletal framework, but actually it doesn't reflect how Unitarian Universalists think today. One of the things that Unitarian Universalists have is, you probably know about the 7 principles, but also there are these sources of our living tradition. To try to get a little further or deeper into where all of this comes from than just this concrete conduit. The first listed is direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. And yes, if you've been following along, that's good old transcendentalism. It's Thoreau, and it's the rediscovery in the Western world of a whole lot of different spiritualities out there. So direct experience, and again, following along, Thoreau does get around in that way of thinking. The second source is words and deeds of prophetic people, which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Yeah, great people, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, et cetera, who have visions of some kind of just society here on this earth that can be built. And indeed, that is a central source of Unitarian Universalist thought. Wisdom from the world's religions, which inspire us in our ethical and spiritual life. Again, this is, I think, playing a little bit too loose with the facts. Yeah, there is a lot of wisdom out in the world's religions, but it has permeated the Unitarian Universalist way of thinking in ways much, much deeper than this would indicate. Hinduism, again, comes right in with transcendentalism and has been there for a couple of centuries at this point. Then what about Islam? The next one is Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbor as ourselves. Yeah, but what about Islam? Because Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are a direct people of the book tracing of ideas that then go into various things such as the Baha'is. So why are we leaving out Islam is a good question. And there are historical reasons, obviously, for that, but a good question. Then humanist teachings, yay, which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. And indeed, one of the central humanist teachings is that to create any concept of God is to create an idolatry. And actually that, yes, being humanist, but also it is out of the Christian tradition, discussed all the way back from the beginning of Christianity, that setting up any kind of idea, concept of God or divinity or the sacred automatically makes it unclear and false in some way. It's too abstract. So yeah, we got that from various sources. As we know, one of the big 10 commandments is you can't make graven images. Again, no idolatries of the mind. And then the last one is spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions, which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. Sounds good, but what exactly does our understanding of spiritual traditions that were often crushed by Christianity, how do we reinterpret those? How do we rediscover those? Because as we know, we don't really know much about Stonehenge even today. So where is the real core of these earth-centered traditions? What about the colonial mind that destroyed so much of the native life here in this hemisphere, et cetera? So that's a little complicated. And as we know, it's also a place where a lot of improvising and making stuff up has occurred. So my question is, what has mixed together? Here we have the Nile coming together, and it takes a while for these things to mix together. And I think that's a central question for American spirituality and religion in general, but especially for Unitarian Universalism, that in some way honors all of these different traditions. Most traditions, if you're a Presbyterian, you must think that's the one that's right, or at least I'm a traditional Presbyterian and therefore I want to be one, but I know that, there are all these other things out there. So how are we mixing these spiritualities together and these understandings? Again, back to the first slide, the idea that religion is culturally based. So Hinduism occurred in a particular place in a particular culture, how do we understand those other cultures, or do we understand them, and how do we bring them into our own ways of thinking? And I think that's one of the central challenges for Unitarian Universalism going forward is what is really going into the various streams, and does it mix? And if it does, how does it mix? And that's what we'll keep talking about for Coffee and Wisdom. Thanks so much for joining today. We are almost to a milestone on our YouTube subscribers, so go on and subscribe to the First Unitarian Society YouTube channel if you can. Also, we are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and you can help us out keeping the voice of humanism strong by going to PayPal or firstunitarian.org/donate. And I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.